Impatience often kills great results and great habits. Driven Mofos, welcome back to another episode of The Underestimated Entrepreneur. Massive shout out to all of you who have been rating and reviewing this podcast. Numbers are cranking on Spotify, so thank you so much. Our numbers have been going up dramatically on the podcasting platform, so thank you so much. All right, let's get into it today. Something that I notice is a lot of people who come to me for either business coaching or mindset coaching or whatever it is, a lot of people will come to me because they have problems in their business. But one of the biggest problems that most business owners won't pay attention to is their own psychology and their own mindset. I was working with a business owner this morning, quite a successful business owner, and he was stressed out and frustrated, and I hopped on a Zoom call with him, and we're talking about the challenges in the business. And what he was trying to do was he was trying to fix 10 things at the same time. And because he was trying to do that, he was impatient. He was in a rush. He's stressed out. He's frustrated. He's burnt out. He's tired. He's got all this pressure on his shoulders. And he's just super snappy at things. So when problems pop up, instead of handling them like a proper manager or a proper leader, where he can sit there and say, all right, cool, come and let's have a chat. What's going on? How did that happen? Why did it happen? He's reacting going, oh, fuck, not again. And then in his head, when I asked him, I said, how do you respond when there's a problem in the business? He said, oh, fuck, not again. Or he would go, I can't believe that they've done this. And just that languaging immediately drives behavior. It switches his behavior. It switches his emotional state. And now he's caught in this negative state of mind where he's frustrated, he's stressed out. And then when he reacts, he just wants to get rid of the problem because it's another problem on his shoulders. Now, a lot of the time in business, a problem isn't that big a deal. But when you start stacking the problems on one at a time, they might only be 1, 2, or 3 kilogram plates. But if you think about a squat bar or even a backpack, if I start putting 1 to 2 kilogram weights in that backpack over 1 or 2 years, that's a lot of weight. And eventually it's going to pull you down. And so what I had to do was, first of all, I had to stop and help him to clarify. If ever you're stressed out, burnt out, overwhelmed, you want to get down everything on paper. Sit there, note everything out. What's on your mind? So you want to note everything out first. Then you need to go through and prioritize what's the most important thing. But the other thing that you need to do is you need to go back to your one thing or your culture guide, especially if you're a business owner. When someone joins my Business Growth Odyssey program, the number one thing that I do is I ask them, I say, do you have a business culture guide? I've never had anyone say yes and it be accurate. I've had 1 or 2 people who say, I think I've got one. And then they show me and I say, yeah, but it's inaccurate. And the reason why it's inaccurate is that the values are wrong, the mission's wrong, the vision's wrong, and they don't align to each other properly. Therefore, you cannot build a proper strategic plan, which then means that you can't create an alignment between the different departments and the roles. This here can be a huge problem and causes massive bottlenecks in all businesses. So the culture guide, everything grows off of the top of that. So what I did was I sat down with him over Zoom and I said, let's go through and let's restructure that culture guide. And so I had to help him to clarify those things again. Then what we did was we started aligning the key strategic pillars. Those pillars then link into the mission and the values and the vision of the organization, which then create major projects or I guess major direction of the company. Then from there, you start setting goals. So I like to use the OKR method, which is outcome or objective and then key results. And then from there, it makes it a lot easier to work. The other thing that I suggested to him, which is really important, I think, for everyone listening, is you really need to have a focus on one thing at a time. So normally when I start out with my goals, I create a one thing, which is like, what's the one thing in the next 90 days that we're really going to focus on? Like it's the most important thing. And then what's the one thing that we're going to do this year, which is the most important thing? Now, if we do that one thing and we work on the goals or the OKRs to get to that one thing, which then aligns with the mission and the vision and the values, then now all of a sudden we're starting to roll in the same direction. I can manage team effectively. I can get the right reporting. I can set the right targets for different teams, which then mean that I can set the right targets for individuals. And now we've got a team of people all working together. The key thing though that came out of this morning is that when you're overwhelmed, you become impatient. When you try to do too many things, you become impatient. Now, I know this well because I used to be the most impatient person on the face of the friggin' planet. but I was always stressed out, burnt out, tired, frustrated. I would work extremely hard with limited results. And especially small business owners get caught in that, where they're just working flat out and they're doing everything and they're burning out, but they're completely impatient. And because they're impatient, they rush things. And when they rush things and don't put things in place properly, and they don't invest in the right key areas of their business, then all of a sudden the shit keeps hitting the fan. Right? If you hire someone and you're in desperation and you're in a rush, you hire that person and 3 months later you fire them or they quit. Now you're back in the same position as what you were 3 months ago. If you try to fix financial issues and you don't know what you're doing, you end up back in the same place 3, 6, 12 months down the track. I've literally watched businesses just sit there and spin their wheels for months on end, even years on end, just going around in circles because they don't have the right structure. They don't have the right pillars. The leaders don't know how to handle the emotions effectively. And then they become impatient and they try to rush everything. And the more that they try to rush everything, the more impatient they become because the more things break and fuck up and go wrong. And this just creates this vicious cycle of most business owners. This is why 56% of all businesses fail within 4 years and why the majority of businesses don't grow more than 4 staff. Okay, they just won't have more than 4 staff. Why? Because it's too hard. Some businesses will grow, but then they'll collapse back down. So sometimes some of you who are listening, you might have 4, 5, 10 staff, a bunch of contractors. But if you're not on top of everything as a leader and as an owner, and you're not very clear around what you want, and you're not setting high standards, then watch what happens. You'll probably collapse back to a level that you can manage. It just might take a couple of years. So the key thing is that in order to have patience, you need to have clarity. It goes back to the model that I keep reminding everyone about. Clarity times by standards plus environment equals success. If you put people into a shitty, chaotic environment, which is most workplaces, they're going to have low standards. Their standards are going to drop. Now, if you don't have high standards in that environment, it's normally because you don't have clarity. So you need to have clarity first. When you have clarity, you can set standards. When you set standards, then you create an environment of high standards. Those high standards keep the clarity, keep the standards growing, and keep that environment great. So you can tell a lot about a business because if the environment is negative, I had another business owner come to me a couple of weeks ago, and they said that they're getting feedback that their culture is not good. A key staff member was about to leave and they sat down and had a chat, and he said the culture's just turned to shit. If you don't have a good culture, it is hard to have a good environment. But it's hard to have a good environment and a good culture if you don't have high standards, because people with high standards want to work at a high standards business. I could never go and work for a company with low standards. I just could not handle it. That's why I struggled going and doing corporate speaking work for government agencies, not all of them, most of them, and same as councils and things like that, because they're just too slow, don't really want to move fast, don't really want to get anywhere quick, although they say they do, completely different. Even some large corporate organizations, the team moves so slow because there's so much red tape. Sometimes it's not their problem or not their fault, but they move so slow. I like to move fast, I like to move quick. That's why I like working with smaller business owners, because they make decisions quick, they move quick, they can get shit done quick. That doesn't mean that it's impatient. It just means that you move a lot faster. You're decisive and you're a lot more effective. But you need to have those high standards. How do you have high standards? You need to have clarity. What do you want? What do you really want? This here comes back to your key strategic plan and your culture guide. If you don't have those two things and you're a business owner, man, I hope that you hit the target, but you're going to be shooting bullets up into the air hoping to fucking hit something. And most businesses do that, or they grow really, really quickly and then collapse back in on themselves. Do you know how many NDIS business owners that I've spoken to, and they think that the sun is shining out of their ass? But that's because the government, and by the way, for those of you who are overseas, NDIS is the National Disability Support Services. Okay, so essentially it's a disability support thing. But what's happened is that the government have put so much money and so much funding into this National Disability Support Service that they have all these clowns entering into the industry, and they can completely do everything wrong and they still make shitloads of money. So I've met people who are really shit business owners, yet they are making tons of money. Now, the great Warren Buffett, right, the greatest investor in history, said, you don't know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out, which means you don't know how good somebody is until the shit hits the fan. Now, what's happening is that the NDIS, or the National Disability Support Service insurance scheme, a lot of the time the government have thrown a ton of money into this scheme, which now has been milked the fuck out of by all of these support services and stuff like that. I know of people who take patients to brothels, who go out and party with their clients and things like that, who are supposed to be on national disability support. Now, I know that they need to have fun and shit like that, but it's paid by the taxpayer. I don't think the taxpayer want people to be taking money and going out and partying and running amok and stuff like that. Also, you don't want people who are milking the NDIS system, driving around in Ferraris and Lambos and shit like that, because essentially it's a government support scheme. If you do a good job, it's not bad. But when you're doing a shit job because you're a shit business owner and you're driving a Ferrari or a Lambo, you know that industry is massively getting rorted. Okay. And I know people who have been in that industry who are not good, right? And so what's happening now is that the government are starting to pull funding. They're starting to do more investigations. The media have got hold of it. And so the government are going to have to tighten this up. When they tighten it up, all that's going to happen is all the shit business owners who aren't prepared, who haven't done their culture guides, who don't have a good culture, who don't have a proper strategic plan, they are all just going to collapse in on themselves. And the government do this about every 4 or 5 years. They create these new schemes. Like there was one where they were putting insulation into houses here in Australia. And so the government were pumping all this money in for environmentally friendly, sustainable, ecological, shit. And what they're doing is they're putting insulation in houses, right? So it keeps it cooler in summer and warmer in winter and so on. Supposedly it's helping the environment. And then what they ended up finding out was there's a whole bunch of people in there who are using shit. They're charging full price or premiums and using shit quality products. There were people who were getting electrocuted who had no qualifications or certifications who were doing these installs with insulation, and they were going up into roofs and walking around in the roof of somebody's house and then getting electrocuted with power cords and shit like that. And so the government ended up pulling that scheme, or at least tightening it up dramatically. I think they ended up pulling it. All that happened were all these businesses that relied upon it just collapsed overnight. But that's what happens when industries are expanding rapidly. You can be the most dumbest shit and still make a lot of money. But when everything gets tight, that's where the good business owners come out. And like in my industry at the moment, in coaching, the coaching industry is saturated. Every second person I speak to is like, I'm a coach. And I see it every week. It's like, make 10 grand a month, be a coach, make 10 grand a month, make 10 grand a month. Now that's juicy. That's 120 grand a year. It's not that hard to make 10 grand a week in an industry if you're really good at it. But it's hard to make money when you're not good at it and you're chasing the money. Personal training was the same. When I got in there, I made a lot of money in the personal training industry. But there are a lot of personal trainers who came in to make money, but they were never good at personal training. And so they just flood through the industry and flood back out again. So you have to be good. If you want to be a good business owner, you should be focusing on growing your business ownership skills. And that comes from being patient and knowing how to plan effectively, how to drive staff effectively, how to lead people effectively, how to manage people effectively. You need to hone those skills. Most small business owners are shit leaders. They are shit managers. They are shit at business ownership because they've never spent any time or energy developing those skills. They might be a plumber and they're a great plumber, but being a great plumber and being a good business owner isn't the same thing, right? That's like being good at car racing and then thinking that you can fly an airplane. They're two completely different things. They're completely different skills. So this is why so many businesses collapse. You've got to get really good at this, guys. And you've got to be patient. The way that you're patient is you've got to have the right game plan to make sure that you're executing effectively. If you don't do that, you're always going to be impatient, always going to be stressed, always going to be frustrated, always looking for a quick fix. Then you're going to blame all the quick fixes when they don't work, but it's your fault for jumping into the quick fixes thinking that it's going to fix something quick. Now, I tell people, like part of Business Growth Odyssey, my program, that program is a 12-month program for business owners. And do you know how many people don't do that program immediately because it's 12 months? But in 12 months, you learn basic skills, right? When I say basic skills, not if you're part of my program, but in 12 months, if you've never run a business, you have to learn a lot of basics. You've got to learn sales, marketing, branding, administration. There's a whole bunch of shit. Now, there are people in Odyssey that are doing $75 million a year. That's one of the clients we have in there now. I had a client a little while ago that was doing over $100 million a year in revenue. So there are some big players in there. But what the big players, the difference between the big players and the small players is the big players are looking for one thing that they can take away and implement. The small players come in and they need to learn a lot of shit really, really quickly. But again, it's not a quick fix. Because if you're trying to quick fix things, you'll go and do quick fixes, but quick fixes very rarely last. What you need to do is you need to become a better business owner. That should be your goal. It should not be to solve the marketing problem. It should be to become a better business owner. It shouldn't be to just quickly solve the cash flow problem. It should be to be a better business owner. It shouldn't be to quickly hire somebody. It should be to become a better business owner, because great business owners are normally good at hiring, firing, reprimanding, marketing, sales, branding, because they've done all of it and they've developed those skills. So now when they go to hire somebody, they actually hire an expert, someone who's actually better than them. But that's because they know what it takes. If not, you'll hire someone who's shit, who tells you that they're good, and then eventually 6 months later, you go, well, I need to get rid of them now, they're crap. And so you'll have high churn. Marketing agencies do a good job of convincing people to buy marketing, but most of them are pretty shit. And most of them don't make a good ROI. Some do, but most don't. Why? Because most business owners don't know what they're doing when they hire a marketing agency, so they'll hire anybody. And then eventually they realize that they're crap and they don't get an ROI or return on investment. So look, this whole episode was just around being a bit more patient, but the only way you're patient is when you have a clear goal or a clear outcome and you're more structured and you work towards things effectively. You have to also develop your leadership skills, and you've got to develop your business acumen, or you have to understand how to run a business more effectively. The more you do that, the greater you'll be. I look back 12 months ago and I go, man, I was shit back then. But I look back 2 years ago and I was even worse. And I look back 10 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. Now I'm a weapon. That's why I work with a lot of these other business owners, because I know a lot more shit than the average person. I even work, some people have $100 million businesses and I'm still a better marketer than what they are, right? Because they have other skills. If they're a property developer, they might not have ever learned marketing. But now one of the struggles that they have is their ability to sell their product. So now they have to learn marketing and sales, hence why they come to me. Not that I'm a marketing and sales coach, but I've done a lot of this stuff because it's human behavior. So that's where we want to be. Anyway, Driven Mofos, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Keep kicking ass, keep crushing it, get out there, push hard, and I look forward to joining me back here once again for another episode of The Underestimated Entrepreneur. I appreciate you all. Most people waste their life, and I just don't want you to be one of them.